But Philip Ingram is now back in the hot seat, former senior military intelligence officer. I know you were listening to what James Cleverly had to say. He's dashed off to another interview. You always think, well, if you had an hour, you can totally go into every single thing properly. And you can't, but, you know, you're always limited on time. What did you make of him? What do you make of, we've had 3 of the candidates. Still waiting on you, Tom Tugendhat. Keep saying yes, but when? But what do you make of their pitch?
Well, I thought it was great that James came and stood in for me for a little bit this morning. It's interesting seeing all 3 of them. I'm trying to look at this independently. They've all got really positive things to say. I think they get the problem, but what they're still trying to do is protect the decisions that they were part of when they were in government. Of the 3 of them, I don't think it would be right for me to say who I think is coming out as the strongest one, but it is fairly close to the latest interview.
Why are you not a politician? That was so political and diplomatic. Well, let's go to the phone lines, actually, because take a call about the interview with James Cleverly we've just had. But don't forget, I also want to get your thoughts on Frockgate and Flatgate. Keir Starmer now faces questions over the use of Lord Ali's £18 million London flat. Got lots of text messages and tweets about that. Your reaction, you can text 87222, get in touch at TalkTV, or give us a call on 0344 499 1000. But let's go to Nigel, who is in Peebles in Scotland. Nigel, you wanted to react to my interview with James Cleverly.
Yes, I did, Julia.
Morning.
I think the important thing to say is that unless they recognise that they need to merge with Reform, they will not form another government. They've let far too many people down. I voted Reform in the last election because in my seat, only the Conservatives could likely win over the SNP. Yeah. However, I voted because the Reform needed to have the numbers.
You wanted them to have the number of votes, so they had that moral authority.
Absolutely. They needed to have the numbers, which they did. They've got a massive number of votes, but not a massive number of seats. If the Conservatives had done a deal with Reform ahead of the election and stood aside in all the red wall seats, which they knew they had no chance of holding, then not only would those 98 seats that Reform came second in have the chance of winning, they would have won more, because it would have given more credibility to the Conservatives and more credibility to Reform.
Yeah, that would be payback, wouldn't it, for the deal that the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, did when he was leader of Brexit Party in 2019, where he stood aside in pretty much every seat where the Tories were likely to win, giving Boris Johnson his massive majority. But they said this time around, no, they're not going to do it. Here's the thing. There are a lot of people, I know, on the Tory side and the Reform side calling for this merger. Will a lot of people who've been dismayed and sort of disappointed by the Tories, will they actually trust that the Tories will do what they say? They've talked a good game in recent years. I find myself cheering on a lot of the speeches by various prime ministers we've had, and then they've done almost the exact opposite. Would anyone who's gone over to Reform or refused to vote for the Tories last time round and just sat on their hands, will they actually trust the Tories ever again?
I doubt very many people who've actually gone to Reform as opposed to thinking about going to Reform but stayed with Conservatives will come back to the Conservatives. We don't like being lied to. It was noticeable that James wouldn't answer your direct question over whether he challenged the Prime Minister over tax cuts. They're all the same. In 97, I'm 68 now, so I was 41 in 97. I voted for Blair then because I actually believed what he was telling us. Well, within a short space of time, he turned out to be a liar as well. Yeah,
for me, it was Bernie Ecclestone and the smoking ban for everything other than racing, Formula One, because he'd given a million quid, and tuition fees. Those 2 things, it was just absolutely blatant lies to the public.
Exactly. And none of your children will ever have to go to war again, and then we have nothing but war. I'm actually ex-military. I'm not a pacifist by any means, but I don't believe in offensive war. The first Gulf War was justified. The second was not. And we don't believe in the 2 main parties. The only chance they have is to merge with Reform. It would have given credibility. We'd probably have a coalition government now between the two, or worst case scenario, Labour with a very small majority.
I think it would have been Labour with a small majority. I still think Labour were going to win. Nigel, really interesting call. Love to hear everyone else's thoughts on that as well. Thank you so much for that. 0344 499 1000. A quick reaction from you to that, Philip.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Followed this call for the Conservatives and Reform to merge or some form of agreement. I think Reform is too new. And the difficulty is what they haven't had the chance to do is bed in as a proper political party so that they can find their own ground, and therefore it's too early to call for mergers if that was a potential solution, because
it's not too equal.
Exactly, the sands are shifting too much.
Well, again, and you see what's going on particularly across Europe, where you see actually the election of a Labour government, a centre-left government, or harder left, who knows what they are, government in Britain, has gone completely against the political grain of what's going on in the rest of Europe, whether it's in France, in Italy, in Austria, in Germany, where you are seeing a move to the right, particularly on the issue, of course, of immigration, where we know Labour, fundamentally, most people in the Labour front bench think that we should have open borders, and that we should basically welcome in the entire world who wants to come here. That is what they actually believe. That's what they discuss at their dinner parties, I can assure you.
They do, but we see the new Prime Minister sitting down and talking with the Italian Premier Meloni about her policies. And
he'll sit down with Donald Trump if Donald Trump gets elected, but it doesn't mean he's going to agree with him, is it? He knows that this is a big issue. Look, Keir Starmer can do numbers. He can see that he's got a very shallow, very big majority that is very shallow. Even on the polls right now, Labour wouldn't win that election on the same basis. Let's go back to some of your messages saying one of the big things that has really damaged Keir Starmer, plummeting in the polls, not just below where he was at the general election, below where Rishi Sunak was as a Prime Minister who lost the election, below where Liz Truss was when she was forced from office a couple of years ago. From Frockgate to Flatgate, that's played a massive role. Keir Starmer facing questions over his use of Lord Ali's £80 million London flat. If you've seen some of the pictures from it, I mean, just the roof terrace alone, wow. But I've asked for your reaction to all of this. Steve says, what have we learned about Starmer over the past 2 weeks? He thinks he's above the rules. Exactly. Jeff says Starmer is an arrogant, self-serving grifter who thinks the rules are what happens to other people and wouldn't know sincerity or integrity if they each bit him on the bum. Talia says trivialities turned into news stories by right-wing media to undermine a Labour government. It can't, you know what, you tell you what the thing is though, Philip, because these things don't become big stories if they're not what actually, the public care about. I mean, it's amazing how many people do care about it. If you see reaction, not just on X, on Twitter, but calls to newspapers, calls to this show, the reaction, the vox pops you see in the media. People are really angry about this in the same way they were angry about Partygate. And again, it's about hypocrisy, isn't it? Jacob says, keep seeing more evidence of how corrupt Starmer is. He's destroying the country and trying to kill off the British pub. That is going to anger a lot of people. Terry says he's Labour's version of Robin Hood, quite happy to take absolutely anything from the rich, but doesn't give any of it to the poor, keeps it to himself. Awful person heading up an awful party in government. Sooner this 5-year cycle ends and these dangerous clowns are out, the better. Mick says it just gets worse. OAP is supposed to live on a pension, and an overpaid MP can't live on his salary, needs free accommodation and expenses. And that is the thing, isn't it? You just think it's that one rule for you, one rule for us, and this is what Partygate was all about. It's about hypocrisy. It was the I'm too important for the rules, and that's what brings politicians down.
And the old age pension is lower than the recognised national living wage.
Yeah, exactly.
And that puts in
this whole idea that all these pensioners are wandering around rolling in money and just burning £20 notes on the fire. Absolute load of nonsense.
Exactly.
Pretty much the lowest state pension in the Western world, indeed, as well.